Well, hello. It is again Friday afternoon, and I'm happy to do this every week. And I cannot tell you enough how much I appreciate all the attendees from all over the world. It is always a thrill to give, and we do it for the horses, and we are here to help horse and rider to protect them from long-term damage. Often, people don't know what they don't know. And that's why I decided to create Saddlefit for Life, what is based on science and follows the law of nature. And together, as a horseback rider myself, I surrounded myself with people who love their horses, who compete just like I did, and protect the horses. If you're a veterinarian, if you're at the Spanish riding school and you teach as an instructor, you understand how important it is to fit the rider first before it really fits the saddle, fits the saddle, that fits the horse. We also have seen over all these last months, I'm doing this now, I mentioned this book several times. The reason why I'm using this, it's for you to see what does the doctor, what does science say if you ride in the non-gender appropriate saddle? So there's long-term damage to the rider, you will have a cramped seat. And just like I showed you this slide here from the director, we will have problems then for the horse, of course, such as chair seat, spinal problem, etc. So it's really good to see, no matter where I am, South America here, or New Zealand, veterinarians who do dissection, all of them don't want to sell necessarily a product. They're all there to protect the horse. South Africa, wonderful veterinarian. We had a wonderful symposium, and we will have it many times back at our webinars, because you will see how much you can learn just from looking at bones and the deformity, what was caused from bad riding and bad saddles. And of course, we all don't need introduction for this gentleman. Pleasure always to work with him, because he looks on top of the horse, how the rider rides and what it actually does to the horse. So common, we hear as instructors or as students, how many horses still suffer because the riders hang on the horse's mouth, or the rider fights with their seat. And yet we don't know what we don't know. And that's what this whole symposium is, before we go and need to operate on horses. And before we have to learn to read all equine journals, wow, the expression on the horse's face, what is now written by Dr. Sue Dyson here, really shows physical and psychological trauma to these horses. You know, that was the first cover of my first book, and we really don't need to go that far. And I see from the last month, 3 months now, doing these webinars and live streams, that there's so many questions, and that's what I encourage all of you. Encourage you to share, to tell with your friends. I don't mind if you, no matter what question it is relating the saddle, we are here to help to get an understanding. And that's what Saddlefit for Life is. You know, we give back to the horses. We have a lot of veterinarians, professors, doctors, physiologists, gynecologists, a lot of people who work around the horse, and says, you know, the interface, the saddle, can really damage not only the horse and the rider, also give the instructor a bad reputation, or the rider itself, because he can't sit or she can't sit properly, or the physiotherapist or the osteopath. You know, you're doing a great job, but the customer says, oh, it doesn't last, it doesn't hold. Well, why doesn't it hold? Because the interface, the saddle, undoes it again. So I'm super proud to say, over my last several years, we trained over 300 equine ergonomists worldwide, and have helped several companies almost on every continent to open up manufacturing companies, saddle companies, which are now working independent. They don't have to have the name Schlese or Saddlefit for Life, but they are now working to help horses, with the understanding that we all speak the same language, the language of horse. And what changed it? Why is it now so much in the matter? It is because of the change of breed. We had a wonderful expert from Germany who speaks wonderful English, and explained to us how different the breed has changed, massively have changed. And of course, as I already mentioned, we have a gender issue in terms of female riding in male saddles, and medical doctors write about it. So I could go on and on and on and talk to you about all these wonderful people I have met, but this is the hour for you. This is for you to ask this question so you can ride and have wonderful experience before we need to use technology, which is very easy, but this really says it all. There's a lot of opinion, a lot of ideas, but when you can measure the horse's heart monitor and the strides, and you can measure pressure, it makes it pretty easy to show you quick what works and what doesn't work. So together with my experience of 42 years and 150,000 horses I measured, I'm here for you, and I'm open the round for questions. Sonia, I know we had many questions, and there's a lot of questions. We never get to it. So look at the time, it's 6 minutes or 8 minutes past, and we're ready. Are you impressed?
All right, quickest intro so far. And what that means is more questions, more answers, and more chances for our viewers to learn more about Saddlefit and anything to do with sort of equine welfare in that regard.
That's right.
To get us started, I have the very first question. It's a bit of a two-part question, so bear with me. With so many variances between saddle sizes, even within the same size, for example, medium, wide, narrow, from brand to brand, how do I know what my horse actually needs? And what does narrow, medium, wide, extra wide even mean in regards to a saddle measurement?
Okay, so I'm going to stop the screen sharing here so it's easier for me to maybe demonstrate it. So let's start with the actual gullet plate. So I'm going to stand up to show you a little bit better. Here's a blue gullet plate, and the distance from this blue gullet plate from center to the bottom is 16 centimeters. So not very long, 6 inches on each side. Okay, but if I now measure from the bottom of the gullet plate to the other side of the gullet plate, and I get 24 centimeter out of that area, and would say, well, that is a medium, 24 centimeter is a medium size. So the other company has also a medium, but the gullet plate is much longer. So if I measure that one, so now this one is 23 centimeter. Okay, so obviously, if I measure that one, that will be way longer than 24 centimeter. That's 31 centimeter. So if you, however, look at these two saddles, gullet plates faced like going right against each other, they're relatively the same angle. So are we talking about the distance from the bottom to the bottom? Some companies do that, and they verify the medium as anything what is between 22 and 24 centimeter. So they give them range of 2 centimeters. So another company what calls a medium tree width medium has a longer gullet plate, but as you just noticed, that is much wider. So what about the angle? This tool here is over 110 years old. We see books written in the early 1900s. There's already the pictures of this. So you can see here, I can measure angles of different gullet plates. So now we have degrees. Does degree maybe refer to narrow, medium, wide? Again, here we have a gullet plate, much, much wider. So is that supposed to be wide angle or wide width? Because that's where we start. You can see how this gullet plate comes in and then goes straight. Right here where it kinks, okay, right there, most of the time is where the company starts the vertical panel. So in order to show you that, I'm going to get a tree. So here you see a saddle tree. Okay, so right here between my fingertip. Okay, so that is where the gullet plate has that little kink I just showed you. And then on the bottom, okay, so that is very often what companies, when they don't refer to the measurement distance, they refer that in an angle. So this is a wide angle, medium angle, narrow angle. So we got two variances now. The measurement distance and the angle. So that could be very confusing for customers. Then watch this corner right through here. I need my two hands to do it. Okay, well, one hand will do. Okay, so I'm going to squish it together. And now while I let that go, you can see how it opens on top from here to here. So some saddles or companies in this area right here, okay, they'll call that the tree width. How wide my two arms, 3 points, are coming apart or coming together through this area right here. So the distance from left to right, let me get a saddle to make it easier for you to see. Sonia and I, we did some videoing last Monday, and we put these tapes on here. So you can see the distance from this tape to that tape, and that's the vertical panel, wherever the stuffing starts and stops, right up there. Okay, the distance from here to here is where we measure the tree width. And this down here, that is the angle device. So now we got 3 mediums, and the customer gets even more concerned. So unfortunately, as long as we have everybody come up with their own story and everybody gives you a different medium, there is really no telling what is really a medium, what's a medium wide, what's a narrow medium, what's a narrow medium wide. So what I really want you to do, look at your saddle where the stuffing starts on the vertical panel, where I had that green tape. Okay, and then you take a tape measure and you measure from left to right and see what it is. Now, if you bored at the barn and there's many different saddles, go ahead and ask them, excuse me, can I measure your saddles? And then go just measure the distance there, and you will see there is huge variety, huge change. The next thing, what makes this whole thing even more confusing, is that companies start the vertical panel any way they want. Let me explain what that means. You can see from the center to the green tape, some put that stuffing all the way down here. I have a huge opening here, and some put that stuffing, the vertical panel, the stuffing starts all the way up here. So the clearance is very little from that corner to that corner. So higher they go, so narrow that appears. Because the metal plate goes like a roof in a point most of the time at 45 degrees in an angle out. So now, if you bring it further down the panel, then you have much, much wider tree width. Now, you will say, well, that's perfect. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a fake stitch here or take the stuffing out here. Then I got a nice wide tree width. Well, what will happen is if you want to protect the horse from this metal digging into the horse's scapular or shoulder, okay, somehow when the horse moves, this scapular has to move through it. And every saddle has a metal plate. So when the horse's movement comes through here, it's wide enough, so it's room, and the metal is strong enough not to crush the withers. So lower the stuffing, the vertical panel. My hand is the vertical. So lower we go, so less weight-bearing surface or protection from that metal to the horse's back. So many, many people say, well, what is better, a short plate or a long plate? And again, we got so many people with so many different opinions, and it doesn't have to fit the people. It has to fit the horse. So when we look at the horse, let me show you a slide for that. All what we have to do is look at a cross section of a horse. Okay, so let's have a look at this one here. It's an old picture from a book from a veterinarian. Her name is Dr. Joyce Harmon. Here you see, where is it? Right here. It says Pain-Free Back and Saddle Fitting book by Dr. Joyce Harmon. There's many, many other veterinarians who talk about saddle fitting. And here you see the picture out of that book. Now let's have a look. This is the cross section of the withers. Okay. So here you see the splinalis, the top muscle. That's approximately 8 to 10 centimeter below that withers. Now, if you pinch that wither muscle, that horse instantly will drop his neck. You as a rider have lots of weight in the hand. The horse will be totally shut down in the front. Many, many people want to ride properly and want to ride the horse around and bring the shoulders up and get the horse soft through the pole. You have to ride for 20 minutes to make that nerve numb. You have to squish that neck muscle, the spinalis, for 20 minutes before the horse does not feel the pain. Or you have a gullet plate, what is longer than 10 centimeter each side, okay? And then bypasses this muscle is spinalis. Then we got the trapezius. The trapezius is a very narrow, very thin. See how thin that is? That compares to our neck muscle right through here. If you have an apron, what hangs off your neck, just that cloth alone, you have a headache. So if the apron has the straps crossed and not even touch the trapezius, your child can climb on that apron. You can put heavy, heavy weight in the pocket of the apron. Your neck, your shoulders won't hurt. So what did we learn from that? Wouldn't that be nice if we can bypass the trapezius as well? So at the end of the trapezius, you can see how they flare out very, very thin. So the most sensitive area is in the center of the trapezius and under the splinalis. Horses are measured in hands. My horse is 16.3. What does that mean? 16 hands and 3 inches. I learned from a cavalry officer that they used to map the horse. And they went to the horse's highest point of the withers, and they put one hand on the highest point, made a mark, and another hand below that mark. So they have 4 and 4 inches marked. In centimeter, 10 centimeter, the first one on top, they mark this to make sure no blanket, no saddle ever presses here. Then we see this muscle, the huge, thick, longest muscle, longissimus dorsi. If you look at old army saddle, or I'm gonna get a Western tree. Okay? So forever, they based their bars on these long fat muscles. Look how far down it goes before these bars, where the army saddle or Western tree sits on the horse. No Western saddle would ever have the bar start where my pinky is, or have, if this is the gullet plate, a bar what is so high. If we compare it to today's saddles, look where that bar would end. Okay, that would be huge pressure here. So over time, before we had all the fancy social media and marketing and opinion and salespeople, they fitted saddle for fashion, for function, not fashion, for function. Okay, so the horse has to work and should be not pinched on the withers. They always focused on this huge muscle. Now, what is happening when I have a gullet plate, what is too short, right? So if we play a motion video here like this one, okay, so that's the area I was talking where my cursor is, okay? That is super sensitive, okay? Where the shoulder comes back and forth. I took this video in Cambridge, England, University of Cambridge. Horses in the treadmill, you can see how the whole back moves. But you also see this line. Many, many, many horses have this pain line here. This veterinarian right here, Dr. Joanna Robson, puts that on the front page of the book, and she calls that the pain line. Okay, so if the horse gets pinched because the gullet plate is too short, or the salesperson calls that saddle, or that horse measures a medium, and the person goes and finds a medium. But every company gets a different medium. What is really medium? At least when I buy shoes, I know that 11 and a half, 12 is somewhat what fits my shoes. But you can come up with all kinds of different, because saddleries cannot agree to work together and trying to come up with their ideas and make horrible gullet plates. This veterinarian in New Zealand demonstrates it, because she says, for you to have the wither clearance, you got to have that saddle a minimum of 3 centimeters above the withers. We all learned that in Pony Club. So if we look at a short gullet plate and go 3 centimeters down to get the wither clearance, 10 centimeters away from the horrible, very sensitive spinalis and trapezius, how much pressure are you going to put down on a single spot? It is unbelievable how many horses suffer, because this is not my opinion. This is not something I pull out of my nose. This is something I share with all of you to say, a lot of body workers, all of you who do massage therapy, chiropractor, osteopath, veterinarians, you all have seen it. The atrophy on the horses' withers is huge. Okay, and we wonder why the horses don't move and can't move properly through their shoulder, because when the horses move, all this area here, see how this contracts and elongates? How can this work if that metal plate is too short or poking forward? It is physical impossible, and yet many people get sold, like in old days, when the person go with the carriage, horse and carriage from village to village, the wrong snake potion, and the horse pays the price. Because most of the time, the saddles with very short gullet plates have very narrow gullet space. In other words, spinal space. No army saddle, no Western saddle, ever makes the bars narrower than a man's fist, 4 inches, 10 centimeters. How many saddles are out there who are sold out there with their saying, oh, my saddle fits on every horse and the horse doesn't need a wide channel? On whose opinion? You know, the salesman, the veterinarian. The fact is the horse will suffer in silence. The horse will maybe tell you, okay, it really pinches my neck or my spine. That's the only way the horse can react. Think about it. The metal in the mouth is pretty severe. There's tons of different bits. The metal on the shoe doesn't give. The farrier forms this. So why do you think the metal of the neck is much softer? Oh, because you got a fancy gullet, fancy padding, or you got air panels, or you got a super new foam. The metal is so important, just like the proper feet. So when you go to narrow, medium, wide, I encourage everybody, pick up your saddle. Let me get one more time the saddle. Measure wherever the stuffing ends from left to right. Very simple. If you want a number there, get ready, because the number is very simple. The vertical panel should start below the spinalis right here and below the trapezius. So if we know that is 10 centimeters, and we know we want 3 centimeters on top, the vertical panel should start when you measure from the middle of your saddle down, all the way down to the side. You should have a minimum from the middle to here, 13 centimeters, or 5 inches and a quarter, 5¼ inches. Once you have this, the manufacturer who made that saddle has obviously in mind, I want to protect the horse. Now you want to know the tree width. If you measure from here to here, anything between 18 to 19.5 centimeters. That's just shy of, let me get this better with inches. Because that is for most Americans, they don't work with centimeters. So let me show you what that is. So 18 is 7 to 7.5 inches in that area. Now, if the stuffing is going higher, obviously the distance becomes much, much smaller. Most of the time, the saddles, what do not have the 13.5 down all the way to the vertical panel, have a very, very, very short gullet plate. And as I said before, it's going to put massive pressure on the horse's spine. So for you, and I know a lot of people have asked this before, and we can never have enough time doing these webinars. This is, how do I know if my gullet plate is, how long my gullet plate? How do I know if my gullet plate points forward or straight down or back so that the shoulder can slide? Okay. How do I know how the shape of my gullet plate is? Huh? Many people say, oh, my saddle has shoulder relief. Oh yeah, my 3 points are going forward. Or, well, some people say it because they believe on that. Other people say, no, it goes backwards, but it really goes forward. So here's how you can tell. Let me pick up the saddle again. The saddle where the gullet plate goes backwards. Let me go to turn that screen share off so it can really bring that point across. Okay. You can see here, right here, you can see how this vertical panel is behind the sweat flap and behind the flap. So you see that cutout here. Some saddles, you lift up the flap and you can see actually the pocket. Some saddles, like this one, the sweat flap goes over the pocket. Okay, so what I would like to ask you guys, all you need to do is gentle bend that saddle, and wherever the wrinkle starts, the first wrinkle, that's how long the gullet plate is. So the wrinkle started here because this is just leather. This is soft material. This is stuffing, or sometimes air or foam. Okay, but this rigid metal plate will not bend. So if I gentle put it, I see the wrinkle here. I know my gullet plate is that much longer, like I marked with tape on this side. How do I know it's the metal plate goes back? Most of the time, the stuffing goes back. If the stuffing and the sweat flap is one line, then the gullet plate is straight down into the horse's shoulder. If you look at the saddle from the side and there's stuffing visible in front of this flap and in front of the sweat flap, this is called the sweat flap, then the stuffing is forward because the metal point is poking forward. Now, people who build saddles with the gullet plate going straight or going forward, for me, they're just horse abusers. For them, they're going to say, whoa, look at Jochen Schlese, look how he's talking. I don't care what they say because I know, and I'm flying around the world all the time. I see this all the time, the demolition, the crippling from the scapular and the cartilage. I don't make this up. I see this. I read the reports, and it's horrible what these people do, and then salespeople sell. How do you protect your horse? Think logical. Okay? If you're a mom or a dad and you want to protect your child, you will never put them in shoes just because somebody says these are really cool and it's a medium fits. And meanwhile, you know, your son or your daughter happens to have a very wide foot, but not very long. So the width is important, so the toes are not squished. And the length, of course, too, so the deformity is not happening in the foot while the child grows. Then you said, well, I don't care, my child has grown, he can put shoes on, whatever. Even as adults, you all have seen this. I'm approaching close to 60. The age would be, people say, we don't care what other people say. Where we see that our feet changes too. So if you put your feet into tight shoes, and that they're not even metal, those shoes, they're just leather. So back to my point of the gullet plate, measure the distance between the vertical panel. And just like Joyce Harmond does, she puts on top of the panel, on the flap, she takes the whip and she lines it up against that gullet plate. So on the saddle, I use this here. Okay, she lines the whip up on the horse's shoulder, and then she wants to see if it's parallel with the tree angle. If the tree angle is flatter than the angle of the tree, shoulder can't come through. If the tree angle is steeper than the angle of the tree, shoulder can't come through. Unfortunately, we see out of 10 saddles, we see 7 where the angle of the shoulder is too wide. And most of the time, those are the horses who have a hard time going a clear walk. For dressage rider is pace, for jumper rider is a rail in the front. For endurance riders, you have lots of stumbling going on, right? So just like a patio door, it needs to slide open. The wall and the door has to line up. Same with the metal and the shoulder blade. For that to slide easy under, that has to line up, okay? If these two do not line up, the horse will be damaged. A very hard question to answer. This is why I really took my time to really explain to you from the metal plate to the tree to the saddle. And just like the billets on every saddle made anywhere in the world is always 1 inch, maybe 26 millimeter, maybe a millimeter thicker. But every billet what is made, doesn't matter, comes from Germany, from North America, from Argentina, from China, from India, the billet is always 1 inch thick. And in the old days, just like in Western saddles today, the vertical panel always started away from the very, very super sensitive spinalis and trapezius. This here is too often a huge problem. Whew, that was a mouthful.
That was great. And I mean, I just want to talk to our viewers quickly and say that we as an organization really do try to get away from the whole medium, narrow, wide, because as you've seen, it's not standard and it doesn't take into account everything that the horse needs. If you're only considering one of these measurements, then your horse is going to suffer. And it could be something as, you know, I say simple, but not as simple as your horse no longer being sound to ride, or it could be as serious as having a catastrophic rotational fall during a competition because your horse is not able to use his body correctly. And a lot of accidents happen that can be avoided. So that's one of the reasons why we stick to the measurements of the horse, which are laid out by the horse, as opposed to trying to fit them into the mold of narrow, medium, wide, which it doesn't work.
You know, Sonia, you reminded me of something. You know, we have these wonderful horses, and look at this beautiful horse. You know, and we love horses so much, and we pay a lot of money for training, for board, for breeds. And yes, we learned a lot about how the breeding horses caused the new problems, like with the German Shepherds and the hip issues. You know, but if that metal plate, right, that is the richest part, doesn't fit. This deformity here, it's common now. But if you say, oh, why, you know, I don't care, it's just a school horse, or I buy another one if he doesn't work anymore. You know what hurts me more than this, Sonia, is this picture. Look at this horse. You know, that horse there's no more life in his eyes. And we've seen this a lot, haven't we, Sonia?
Too often, way too often.
You know, the psychological damage these horses go under, it's horrible. And you know what I don't get? You know, this University of Switzerland, you know, says, who in the right mind teaches saddle fitting schools still that the saddle has to be hollow when the horse wants to go around? Okay. Yeah, well, in motion, the saddle will come up. No way. if it pushes into the tissue, the muscle contracts, just like a boxer contracts his stomach muscle to protect the blow of the fist, right? So if the saddle has not even pressure, the horse will protect. Then we got the close up here. I talked about the spinalis right there, right? If people sell you a medium tree, and every saddle, it has different idea about medium tree, and the measurements 13.5 from the top to the vertical panel, okay, it's not there. You will pinch the spinalis, and the pressure, no matter what country, no matter what university, will say, this is the anatomy of the horse. This is not the, how can I say, somebody's idea, right? So just like an apron, if it hits the neck, many horses have no wither muscle, okay? And I remember when I was working in England, there was this discussion, oh, but if I don't put stuffing there, how can we get the saddle of the horse's withers? Well, start off by making saddle trees what fits the anatomy of the horse and not some person's fantasy or idea because it's a great sales pitch. And here's another picture I got from a veterinarian. Here you can see the cranial nerve 11. Okay, so that goes and inserts into the trapezius, and then it ignites if the horse bites, okay, or the tree is too narrow. See that line? What was I talking about? That's the pain line. Dr. Robson calls this the pain line on her book. And if the saddle pinches up there, that cranial nerve 11 causes all kinds of problems. Horse won't go forward, horse will hollow, and it's just a vicious nightmare. I cannot not urge you enough to really consider, I mean, these are old pictures, Sonia. We have those forever. But that metal plate, and look at this, many companies have that steel sticking right on the bottom out. And just because they put a little wool on underneath or a nice saddle pad, that doesn't protect that cartilage, because what we got on top, we have a heavy rider, it gets girth on top, and if I jump, all my pressure on that stirrup bar, which is riveted to this metal, cripples the horse's shoulders. I mean, we really have to stop hurting these horses and understand they're right-handed horses and left-handed horses, and that's the same with saddles. They're right-handed saddles and left-handed saddles. And then if people don't want to change, and I'm talking not you as a rider out there, I'm talking you as the manufacturers. I helped, as I said, over hundreds and hundreds of manufacturers worldwide to understand this, but there's still thousands of people out there who say, you know what, I'm going to straighten out my horse. That is just as ridiculous as you would say as a veterinarian, I'm going to do the operation and I place all the organs properly and straight and even and symmetric in the horse's body. It's ridiculous, right? Horse's body is not symmetric. Human's body is not symmetric. The horse's body is not symmetric. We can maybe ride him as good as we can straight, but you cannot change a left-handed horse to a right-handed horse because you can't train pain. And that's kind of where it really ends. And sad, we see it numerous times, and only through people like you yourself who listen to this and share this with us, we will stop this madness. People call themselves saddle fitters, but have no idea about human and horse anatomy. So there is an incredible amount of misinformation out there. And that's why we, together with the German National Riding School, came up with a new term, what's called saddle ergonomists. These people follow science, physics, to a huge network of experts. We constantly learn. Sonia, that article you sent us just recently, it's amazing what they published in Denmark. You might want to address that a little bit?
Actually, before we do, I wanted to get in a few more questions. And before going on to the next one, just
Sure.
give a little bit more insight to our viewers in regards to the consequence of pain in a horse is not just limited to physical limitations in regards to gait abnormalities and incorrect posture, but a constant in regards to pain and stress in the horse also relates to more spooky, less able to focus and learn and to take in whatever training you're trying to do. And then these horses end up getting labeled as dangerous or, unworkable, not because they are bad, but because they are constantly in a phase of stress that they simply can't function in a mental capacity that is normal. So
Right.
pain has consequences beyond the physical.
Yeah, yeah.
And on to our next question. This is in regards to some of the different saddle fitting methods that are out there to this day, where, for example, they would put the saddle 2 to 3 inches behind the scapula to accommodate for the shoulder movement. And the person wants to know why that's an issue, what problems it causes, and if it actually works as a fitting method. And
Okay.
sorry, also to add in why you would fit to the withers in regards to angle and width when even veterinarians say that the saddle needs to fit to the shoulder.
Good. So let's stay with this picture I have right now up here. Okay, the one on the right, you can see super wide shoulders, super atrophied in the wither area. Okay, so the rib cage area, if the muscle is there, like here we got a little bit more muscle than on this side. Okay, that angle on the withers is always flatter, shallower than the shoulder angle. The shoulder angle is always steeper. Okay, so we know a healthy scapular has no deformity on top. Many horses, special jumping horses, because both shoulders come back, okay, the tree is not wide enough and it's not fitted to the steeper angle of the shoulder. Remember how I was talking about it? The shoulder has to slide through. So all this excess bone you see here, that is how nature protects and forms extra bone from the damage the tree or the saddle can cause. So if I go ahead and place my saddle further backwards, let's use this horse here. So the angle on the wither area, it's way steeper. Every inch you go back, the angle goes wider to the back of the ribs. So if you fit the saddle 2 inches further back of the horse's scapular, here comes nature. Gravity rules. That metal wants to go always forward because, well, if you understand how the horse's skeleton looks like, the vertebrae are all the way down here, and then it goes all the way up towards the back of the sacroiliac joint. So very few horses are level here. Most of them are downhill. So the saddle wants to go forward. Many saddle have built saddle trees, companies, without the front of the tree, what we call tree points. Let me get a tree. Okay. So they actually said, why don't we protect these horses and we just chop that right off? So we don't have any problems of the horses causes damage to the shoulders. That saddle would fly over the horse's neck. Okay, there's nothing what holds that saddle from going forward. What I like you to think about, the tree points looks for the edge of the scapular. A good equine ergonomist or saddle ergonomist, you see old term saddle fitter, their job is to cushion that area as good as you can. Because it will go forward, gravity, because of the rib cage and because the angle goes always narrow. So when you sit on something, it will always go to the smaller area. Same with the girth. If you have the crazy idea to put the girth now, let's say 10 inches behind the elbow, it will go forward and most of the time stops, if it's a normal shaped horse, 4 inches behind the horse's elbow. Okay. The girth will always go to the smallest area, so does the tree. So what is the idea of putting what is the idea of putting the saddle further back? Is it so I can damage the transitional vertebrae in the lumbar area, because that will happen. If you push the saddle further back to have the 2 inches more room, you put huge pressure in the lumbar. And we all know horses' backs are no shorter and riders' butts today are bigger. So we run out real estate on the bottom where the saddle can sit, but we need more larger saddles for today's riders, which are taller, heavier. So now you have this longer saddle and you put super pressure in the lumbar area. Just because somebody says, well, you know, when the horses move, the shoulders come back, but research only shows 4 to 7 centimeters. So that's give or take 2 inches. Okay. So if I put the saddle 2 inches further back and I have a small saddle, that might work if the horse is super uphill and the rider is very small and the horse is very big. But if it's more reality, what we see today, then we need to look at the next point. The horse's shoulders moves way more than 2 inches. Okay, there is this huge misunderstanding, and you can do it yourself. You sit on the horse's back and ride, and put your horses behind you. You ride on the horse, sit further back, and put your shoulders on the horse's shoulders, and you can feel how far it comes back. If you have a horse that can do it themselves, you know, that looks more than 2 inches. That is almost 6 to 8 inches. That shoulder goes all the way back. So how is that sliding underneath the saddle tree if the tree is not wide enough in the tree width and has the proper angle, what matches the scapular to slide through without damage? Okay, so putting the saddle back 2 inches, because some industry teaches this, means they don't believe on Newton's law, the grandfather of physics, who talks about gravity, okay? Because everything will go to the smallest spot. That saddle, what you fit it to a wider angle, goes now to a narrow angle, and we just learned, or if you don't believe me, measure it yourself, you will see that the shoulder is even steeper. Now you have an angle what is super wide in the tree, the shoulder wants to come back, the horse trips, clips, and the atrophy is horrendous. Then you wonder why he has so much dry spots, white hair, or literally crippling withers and shoulders. Horses, most of them are not fighters. They're herd animals. Very few alpha mares or stallions who will fight back. The majority of them just die inside, right? In the soul and deformity in the body. So I have yet to see a veterinarian who says, put the saddle 6 to 8 inches back or 2 inches. I have yet to read a book or any kind of professor, any universities, nobody who has any saddle selling background or interest. Okay? We all know how we can sometimes manipulate research papers. That's well-known fact in all industries. But if we give the veterinarians in the research paper the benefit of the doubt and think a little logical, or lift the horse's leg up, when that leg goes forward, that upper arm pushes the scapula upwards, backwards. So for that to slide underneath the saddle tree, you got to have a tree width and angle matching. So forget and ignore people who are trying to tell you the earth is flat. There are still people who believe the earth is flat. We know through science, the earth is actually round. And we know through science, the horse's scapular, and just like in this picture, goes way bigger in the shoulder. And we also know, if you make that metal not match the angle of the horse, that's just the beginning of the madness, because then the holding line comes, they're completely losing all the engagement of the back because they're protecting. Look how steep that shoulder is. Okay, so here a clear case of areas where the horse's shoulder blade is wider but the angle is steeper. And if we want shoulder freedom, we got to have saddles where the customer or the saddle maker or the saddle fitter or the saddle ergonomist can identify and measures over the shoulders and identify and measure the saddles in the width and in the angle, okay? Because eventually the bones all fuse and the horse has no more neck and gallops like a broomstick in the back, absolutely rigid. And these horses will adapt to survive by fusing in their joint. And then last but not least, the joints go. So I encourage you to take a whip, put it where your saddle sits, behind the shoulder, lay it right flat on the withers. And then I encourage you to put the whip not on top of the shoulder, on the side. Okay, so if you put the whip, in my fingers is the withers, okay, there's lots of cartilage here. Okay, and that's floppy, it moves. Okay, you want this bone here, okay, you want to make sure that this edge here, okay, that's the shoulder edge people talk about. That's the angle. So you put the whip, most of the time you go down 4 inches. Again, that's how soldiers map the horses, one hand width. And then you lay the whip parallel to this bone. If you put it on top, it's the same thing if you would measure the width of the head, right? So you measure the side. Why would you measure on top of the head, right? If you want to know the angle of the side of your head. Most people really understand when we talk about metal fitting, the same thing with saddle fitting or helmet fitting. You know, a helmet needs to fit from front to back. That's the length. A helmet has to fit in the width of the head. That's the width of the helmet, or in the saddle tree, the tree width. And the helmet has to fit parallel here. Shouldn't dig into my temples, and it shouldn't flare out like a sombrero. Otherwise, the helmet flies around. The helmet should sit nice and even and flat here. You don't need a super, super tight strap to hold the helmet in place. And if your saddle fits like your helmet, you don't need a super, super tight girth. All right, so length, width, and angle to the shoulder, because the shoulder moves, has to fit. If you ignore that, or you follow some people's idea who have other thoughts, maybe selling their products because their products can't be adjusted in the angle and in the width independent, your horse will pay the price. And you, of course, because you keep buying new saddles.
Perfect. And another final question is, for the people, when they have their saddle on their horse, how can they check correct tree width?
That is a super, super tough measurements to take. But let's take this one here. You can see this horse's head is down, okay? And when you want to know how wide this is, and the other one is here, okay? There is an old soldier's measurement. Let me see if I can find one.
Is there anything that they can do sort of with like a pen or to eyeball, just a quick cursory check of,
rather than going with measurements, just like a pen? Okay, so the easiest answers, I'm going to turn off my screen share to make absolutely sure everybody can see it. Every English saddle has a D-ring here. Okay, so most saddles have that D-ring right there. Okay, so let's say you put the saddle on the horse, no pad, no girth, no rider, just loose on the horse. This is the withers, and my pinky is the side of the withers. Wherever the pen is, okay, wherever the pen is where the D-ring is. So you're going to take another pen, or when it's on the horse, just focus on the D-ring, and you want to have a second pen easy running through here. And where that D-ring is, in this case the pen, that pen needs to be easy going through the horse's withers and the saddle. If your pen doesn't slide towards the pen, let's say my hand here is the withers, and you're already stuck here, okay? It doesn't go further. I guarantee you that tree width is way too narrow for your horse. Okay, so that is a very, very easy way to check. Look where the D-ring is, put it loose on the horse, no pad, no girth, no rider, slide it easy underneath, and there got to be space between the horse's withers and the saddle. If it's not, tree is too narrow. If there's lots of space, like a marker space, then the tree width is too wide. Did that help?
Perfect. Yeah, that's perfect. And before you put that saddle away, just a reminder for how they can check tree angle to shoulder angle.
Okay. So again, start off with pushing down. Where is the panel? Where is that metal plate stops? Okay. And then you lay that pen parallel to that edge. Here I put the tape on so people can see. Now, while the saddle is behind the shoulder blade, not 1 inch, 2 inch, 6 inch back of the horse, behind the shoulder blade where it will end up, because it has these 3 points, you look at this, maybe somebody holds this pen, and then you take a second pen and you put that 4 inch down over the widest part of the horse. Let me show you on that slide here.
And also just a quick reminder, it's 4 inches in front as well.
Yes. So what you do is you have the saddle in this area right here. Now you go down 4 inches, and where the widest part is, which is most of the time 4 inches in front of the saddle, you lay the saddle parallel. Let me see if I have a picture from a vet, how they showed it. Bear with me, because I think she shows it very nice how you can check it. I just have to find it. Here we go. All right. So you can see this is again from the book from Dr. Joyce Harmon, a veterinarian. See where the whip is parallel? It's not on top of the shoulder. It's 4 inches in front on the shoulder. And she says the tree has to be parallel with the shoulder. Here's the shoulder blade on the left. See how that's follow? See how steep this is? It not only is the tree width way too wide on the one on the left, you can see all the space there, but also the angle is way too steep for the angle of this horse's shoulder. What about the one in the middle? No pen goes in here. It's not too narrow, it's not too wide. And hard to see on this picture, but the angle on this most likely is wider than the angle of the shoulder. What you want is the angle of the shoulder has to match the angle of the tree, and the tree width needs to be wide enough that where my cursor is right there, 1 pencil width space. Did that answer the question, Sonia?
Yes, perfect. And it gave hopefully all our viewers a way to quickly check their saddle fit at home and be able to determine whether or not they need to call someone out to do a full assessment, or if they need to really start looking at a new saddle for their horse.
Yeah, and some saddles can be adjusted, right? But I would always ask your saddle maker or your saddle fitter or the company, can the saddle be adjusted in the tree width and in the tree angle? And if they say yes, then say, show me how. You know, how do you actually do that? So when they can do that, great. If not, make a decision. Should the horse pay? Should you pay? Or who's going to pay for it?
Yeah, and also another warning, a lot of fitters and people in general, including tack stores, will use adjustable interchangeably with like an interchangeable gullet plate. So a saddle whose gullet plate can be changed is not adjustable. That's an interchangeable saddle. So it is very different.
Sonia, is there anything on the academy what you would advise or look? I know we have some free videos and some that can go and some courses. Anything you can suggest for them and how that can help if some of the viewers want to maybe learn a little bit more?
So for those who are not necessarily interested in certification and just want to learn to be able to protect themselves and their horses against fitters who are really only interested in selling a saddle, we do have the introductory course, and it goes through a lot of what we talked about here and a lot more.
It's online, right?
It is 100% online, so the registration is always open, but we do also have separate videos for, you know, specific topics that you can go and check out depending on how much you know now and sort of what you want to get into and what you want to learn more of. So we have the intro, which is, you know, for those who do not want to go and become a CEE or CSE. And then we also have like singular videos that focus specifically on mapping, a dynamic fit, what to look for in the gaits, what to look for in the posture, and that kind of thing. So there really is something for everyone, and you can customize your learning however you want. There's always someone there if you need help or if you have questions. We're always there to explain things for you if you're having some difficulty.
I like to finish off by saying this because I get to hear this a lot. You know, people say to me, you're doing this since 42 years and you're setting up more and more companies. In other words, competition to your manufacturer. I always say, you know, our market share is so minuscule and I can only make so many saddles and can only fit so many saddles. I also learned from my master who taught me riding, that is our duty as a rider, whatever we learned to teach our students when we give riding lessons. I just took that opportunity and says, you know what, whatever I do as a trainer, as a rider, as a judge, why don't I do that as a saddle maker as well? So with over 150,000 horses we have measured over the last 42 years, 5 different continents and all these vets out there, in the end, when we share, we learn. And if I set up another 250 companies, it's still not enough to help all these poor horses. So in the end, we really want to help the horse. And I hope you enjoyed the session and you share that with all your friends so you help more horses as well. I say goodbye with this beautiful video from Sonia. It's when you look at it, you can see how much the horse will give for us.